It's 2:01. I'm just going to read off who I believe is on. I think Danny, Helen, Sonia, Leslie, Annalise, Sheldon, and Charlene. Is there anybody that I missed?
Abby.
Ab. All right. Great. Welcome.
And Lori.
Lori. Welcome, Lori.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Fantastic. Well, let's hop into it. I'm just going to actually just start. Let me get into presentation mode. It looks like a few people are viewing my screen. If you want, there's a link in the confirmation email I sent out. You're more than welcome to click on that, and that will allow you to see my screen, which is a PowerPoint presentation, and we may go off of that a couple times to, or at least once, to another document. But looks like more people are coming in. I'm just going to hold for a quick second. And maybe as you're doing that, what I'm going to do is just kind of get us going, just so we kind of have our true north to aim at. I'll kind of allow us to reflect on the mission for just a second. So our mission as the National Invention Convention is to provide students with opportunities to develop creative problem solving and problem identification techniques through inventing, innovating, and entrepreneurial activities, leading to greater consideration of STEM careers in high school and college. And so that's, in that context, is really how we're looking to build this. And so as the steering committee, we really appreciate everybody's involvement in helping us get this wonderful mission off the ground and making it very successful and a good complement to all of your programs. Is anyone having any problem getting to the screen share?
No.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, it looks like most everybody's on at this point. So here's our agenda. So we want to talk through a few things. Some will be more cursory than others. We'll dig deep into a couple of these, but there are a few more update-oriented things here at the top of the list. One of the things we wanted to do, because we spent so much time on it in the last call, was to talk a little bit about where we're going and kind of how we're progressing in terms of deciding what grade levels would be involved in the National Invention Convention. Danny, I don't know if I'm more than happy to talk to it, but did you want to address that?
You're on a roll, Bill. You go ahead.
Okie doke. So, yeah, as you all know, we did a survey. We got some good feedback from the survey from you all. So the next step that we're embarking on is to survey folks who have who are either teachers and or have recently taken students on out-of-state trips. So people who are doing the travel with young students, and really to understand what the limitations are and where we would be most comfortable in including students and or having an age cutoff in terms of traveling to Washington. You also, and Danny, you probably know more about this in terms of, I think you've been directly distributing letters of intent to folks, and I think you've received some back, but I think the question here is whether or not, if there are any questions that folks have on the letters of intent in terms of participating in the National Invention Convention, whether you want to talk about them now or at least to make sure that we move those along so that we answer any of your questions, whether online or offline, and probably best to direct those, if you do have questions, offline to direct to Danny. Anything to add to that?
Summarize there, everybody should have received a link to the letters of intent, and again, they're non-binding. The point here is to show all the people that we talk to and to show each other that we've got a group of people together here that are trying to make this happen and working towards that goal, and therefore it's fundable. Helen and I have been having some great meetings lately with lots of the potential funders, and I've been having some good email discussions with some of you about lining up corporate presentations. We've got a fairly, almost totally final presentation deck for sales that we'll be showing everybody next meeting, but some of you will probably see it beforehand. It's about a 15-page slide deck that's designed for corporate CMOs to be able to go and start on the fundraising process with each of you.
Has anyone not received the letter of intent from Danny? Okay,
This is Sheldon. I've received it. I can't remember whether or not I signed it, though.
I don't believe I have it for you. That's the answer.
Okay. Well, when I
not have
get
it.
back to Boston, I'll take care of it. I'm going to write it on my to-do list right now. Of course,
Awesome.
That's no guarantee it gets done, but it helps. Actually,
I will tell you that I have not gotten many back. I've gotten them from Chicago, Massachusetts, Tennessee, and the STEM Innovator, Biz Innovator portion of Iowa. So that's only 4. So the rest of you, let me know if you have any issues or ever. I think it's just been a while, a process for people to go through it.
Fantastic. Excellent. I just leave it open for a second. Does anyone else have any other thing they want to say about the letter of intent or questions? Okay, good. So the next topic we wanted to share with you, so we also did a survey on sort of if the National Invention Convention is a Friday-Saturday event, Saturday being more of the competition, Friday being more of a sort of open day to excite, inform, educate the students. We were looking at things to do outside of the USPTO headquarters, and so Danny had put together a list of potential sites to see, and the International Spy Museum, not surprisingly, was number 1. You can see from this list, then the U.S. Mint, and then actually the 2 Smithsonian exhibits were tied for 3rd, the National Air and Space, and then the Museum of American History. There was a question that was posed in the surveys, in one response, that the observation was, what I see missing here is the commercialization process. So what happens when a person or team develops new IP and commercializes it in a business? And does anyone have any thoughts about if having one of the activities that's available be, or one or more be around the commercialization process?
Well, my question would be, what activity would that consist of?
It's a good question. Would
Well,
that
we
be
have
USPTO or other?
One option that we have is in D.C. there's a place called 1776, which is the sort of the epicenter for startup activity in D.C. And it's a facility where they have lots of startups that are going on there. So what we could have happen is the students could come to 1776 and go through a lightning fast, like 4 15-minute sessions with 4 startups that are doing some neat things that they might be able to relate to. Maybe a clean energy startup, maybe something that's in some sort of gadget or high-tech thing, maybe a gaming thing, that could be one approach. We could also, there are companies in DC that might be willing to open up the doors to have us come in and look at some of the stuff that they have going from invention to market. I know there's one in particular in DC, but they're sort of outside of DC. We might have to have them come to us. Is they invented the 6-axis Wii controller. And so the whole idea of putting motion and all the stuff that people are doing today with wearables and with gaming devices and virtual reality and all that sort of stuff, kids tend to get really into that sort of thing. We might be able to have some people come and demo how their team has been how they come up with new ideas and then commercialize it into a business. So that's an option. They might be able to do that as exhibits around on Saturday. We could maybe possibly do the commercialization process as exhibits that kids could go to. when they're not being judged and they're going around looking around at other things. That's an option. I'm just giving ideas here. Anybody else have any ideas?
So this is Veronica in Ohio. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you great.
Okay. So two quick comments. I think it will probably depend on what grades, to a degree. It's going to depend on what grades we decide to offer the National Invention Convention, what some of the programs that we offer might be. I know that one of our partners here in Ohio is the Intellectual Property Law Association in Cleveland, and that alone has over 600 members. And many of our kids have the opportunity to go through kind of an actual patent process for, as a consultation with those different attorneys. And they stay, as dry as that might sound, they stay really engaged with that because, they're talking about their invention. And a lot of their parents, can kind of assist in that process. Our kids are K through 8, and we've had everybody participate in that. And it's, it's not necessarily fancy, but that's kind of the next step for a lot of our kids. So I wonder if, partnering either with, ours is called CIPLA, Cleveland Intellectual Property Law Association, and having them send representatives, or there's probably, a national IP association that we could try to see if they could be there to just do consultations with the kids right there, with the uniqueness of their design. Go ahead and open a patent. They'll all have their journals, with them. I just think it might be interesting to see how many of these prototypes could actually get patented right there in D.C. And
Hi.
to facilitate that.
Go ahead.
Hi, this is Leslie from Iowa. I'm pretty sure that was our comment. I agree with Veronica. One of the things I was thinking, is there anybody on right now from USPTO?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. So we worked with them, and one of the things I was hoping is that they would have a group of their patent attorneys available and sort of do, like Veronica was saying, consultation. So that's one of the things we found really effective. We also have groups, and I believe they're across the country, called 1 Million Cups, where kids pitch and get entrepreneurship feedback from startups and other entrepreneurs. So like I believe it was Danny saying at the beginning, sort of these mini startups and where to go if you're not quite at the patent process, and sort of the pitch it to win it competitions too. But what I like is, depending on where the kids are at, if they have their idea and it's ready to think about getting a provisional patent, if we had those attorneys right there, and now with the new patent structure, it's very cheap for kids to do, or it could even possibly be free here, or they could go back into an entrepreneurship loop with a group like 1 Million Cups, where we could have people volunteer to give them feedback for how to move it along in the commercialization process.
Sure. So Danny, is there anything USPTO can offer us in terms of programming?
So we explored this exact line. By the way, the reason why USPTO is not on this call is they've got all sorts of very peculiar policies about how close they get to things that they're trying to get sponsored. And so since we're going through the approvals process within the USPTO, they need to stay a little bit of arm's length and make sure that they're not consulting on our business model and certain things. They've got all these arcane rules to go into. So they're not. It's not. They don't want to be on the calls. They want to be on the calls, but right now they're having to opt out of them. So we had what they basically said is we can't take any sort of position that would give any advice about patenting. Well, the USPTO can talk about the process, but they can't take it down to an individual and talk to an individual about what they've got to do. If we did that, we'd have to do with some IP lawyers. Now, we had some discussions last week with Louis Foreman. Some of you might be aware of Louis Foreman. He's the founder of Everyday Edisons on PBS and Edison Nation, and he's the publisher of Inventor's Digest, and he's just Mr. Inventor all over the place in lots of different ways. And he just did an announcement with Amazon where they're doing a contest where the winner gets actually their product put together and put onto Amazon. So he's a pretty big player, and he's also he's chairman of the board of the IPOEF, the IP Owners Association Education Foundation, which is designed towards trying to educate kids about the IP process and it's comprised of lawyers from all over the U.S. And so it's conceivable that we could do some sort of deal with the IPO to have them bring lawyers in and give each kid like a 10-minute consultation. I don't know how effective that would be, since you really need to go to do a background search on these. If we've got 300 kids, that's a lot of background searching to be able to give kids advice about how patentable their invention is. I mean, unfortunately, the best that any lawyer would do when you were talking to them, be able to say, well, based on their knowledge, what their gut tells them and everything, but it's really not definitive till you sit down with a lawyer and you really get down to what's already out there and see if you've got something distinctive. So I think sticking to the process makes a lot of sense, but taking it down to the individual level, that might, I think the lawyers might push back as to whether or not they think that they could actually do that in such a short form legal opinion.
Well, I think there's another issue there too. This is Sheldon, and I've got, well, I've made a career out of patenting my inventions. I think, at least from what I've seen, most of the things the kids do, even though they're very innovative, are not really patentable things per se. And I think to have somebody tell them that would be discouraging. I think educating, particularly at high school level anyhow, about the patent process would be interesting and educational. But I really don't want to discourage any of the kids because they happen to do something that has no practical value.
This is Leslie again. Danny, I agree with you about the lawyers wouldn't do a drill down like patent search, and it's the process. So at the National USPTO, they have one sheet like, here's how you would go through the next steps if you wanted to see if this was a commercializable product. So I think, one background check. So I think for the students that are interested or the parents, I think that's really valuable. To the point about not discouraging the students, one of the things is I think that's the true kind of nature of innovation, and showing them to have this resiliency. It doesn't mean that their invention is not valuable or useful. We're just saying it may not be novel, so that you can keep inventing things, but you may not commercialize it. So I think it's important for them to understand that difference.
I fully agree. I fully agree.
Other thoughts in terms of other ways we might educate or expose students to the commercialization process and or intellectual property?
I don't know exactly what the format this is going to be at the presentation, but it's always fun here in Iowa. We did we did Shark Tank and Minute to Win It, and just giving students that opportunity to give sort of their 30-second elevator pitch for fun in front of a group, as opposed to their formal presentation or on a novel idea. So that's kind of a fun idea, just to keep them as they're waiting around. So we've done that here.
Well, and if we want to have them meet, if we want to have them interact, and meet people from other areas, we could even, it seems like, do something where we form, do an exercise to form quick teams of, sort of integrated between regions, and a situation where, as a team, then they, do something quickly and create a pitch and whatnot too. So there seems like there are a lot of options, both in terms of getting them to relate to each other and then giving them some exposures outside the building as well.
Yeah, and with the USPTO, when they came here to Iowa, we did something called the Inventors Challenge. And that's a lot of fun because it's exactly what you said. You get them together in a team and you have like 5 things. They have to come up with a jingle. They have to, have a drawing. So I think something like that with different regions would be a lot of fun. Cool. And pretty easy to pull off.
So, Danny, do we want to get volunteers for a team to sort of talk through Friday and come and sort of develop a recommendation for the content for Friday?
Right. What I'd love to be able to do and get everybody's feedback here as to whether or not you are on board with this. If we could take certain topics and have 3 or 4 people peel off and come back with a recommendation on things, there's only so many things we can work through as an entire group. And so if everybody could volunteer to be on one thing, and I'm not envisioning that this is a really intense commitment. It's just 3 or 4 of you get together to say, here are the time slots that we've got. The USPTO would love to have things happen at the USPTO on Friday morning. So like from 9 to 12, we're at the USPTO doing IP-type activities. And then the Friday afternoon and evening, we would be traveling around D.C. and doing that sort of fun-type stuff with the intent of getting back to the hotels around 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, having had dinner. And then Saturday, having mostly the competition process, but also having activities around the exhibition so the kids can see each other's inventions and spend time doing that, but also then possibly get some of this maybe one-on-one type of stuff if that's what you want to do. I think that's generally where we're at. We're looking to try to end up Saturday, I think, by 4 o'clock. So some people might head to the airplane. Some people might stay the night and want to go off and do some other things at DC for Saturday night. It's going to depend on who's near and who's far away, I think, as to when people leave. So, Bill, yeah, if we get 3 or 4 people that'd be willing to take a look at the schedule here and come up with the recommendation for everybody else to give feedback on, that would be great. I'll throw it back to you.
Yeah, what I'm kind of almost hearing is what we should probably do in a follow-up email is break up the content into a couple of modules. So Friday morning, Friday afternoon, and then sort of Saturday, and get sort of teams to make recommendations on each of those. Is that reasonable?
That sounds great.
Okay. Yeah, we'll do that. So we'll communicate that back in a follow-up email, and so whatever, wherever you'd like to participate, we'd certainly love your insights. And the goal would be probably for our next call or maybe the one after to have, each sort of team come with its recommendations, and then we can winnow through it and figure out sort of the best path.
Hey, this is Annalisa with
Yeah.
Chicago. I just had a quick question. So for the Friday morning at the USPTO office, did they have an idea of the activities that they wanted to do, or is that something that we should come up with in our group?
It's a good
So
question.
will there be a group assigned for that?
Danny, you and Helen have had those conversations. Any feedback on that?
Helen, feel free to chime in here, but what we heard from them is they have all sorts of programs that they're willing to do. If we just sort of tell them the general topic and the time frame, they'll go ahead and craft something to match. Helen, did you hear anything differently?
No, I think that was the gist of it. And Dawn and Leslie could probably attest to the fact that there were some pretty interesting programs that they did in Dallas. I especially you were there longer than I was, Leslie. Didn't you think that they had some interesting stuff there?
Yeah, I think what we should do is, for example, Dawn and I would like to do the commercialization entrepreneurship activity, but in Dallas and in Silicon Valley the year before, they have all kinds of kind of creative activities. So I think we should just frame out what we're thinking of, and we can work with them once it's signed, sealed, and delivered.
That sounds great.
Helen, what I'm thinking about, I don't know if you were there that day, but they had them in with all of the toys and the gizmos and all that stuff, and they were teaching about intellectual property then. I think that's something the kids would really enjoy.
No, I wasn't there that day.
Okay. I will frame up what they did in Dallas. I'll look through my notes just to give you an idea. And I could have a sidebar conversation with Jorge at USPTO just to kind of see what he's thinking.
That's great. Cool.
Okay.
Thank you. So is there anything else on the events Friday and or Saturday that anyone wanted to talk about today?
Are there any comments on the ordering here? The Spy Museum, I used to live in D.C. I've been to all these things a gazillion times. The Spy Museum's interesting in that it has a lot of little gadgets and shows people being hidden away in cars and secret cameras and like that. So it's sort of interesting from that perspective. The Museum of American History actually has an entire wing on a floor dedicated to invention. And it's the Lemelson Invention Museum, or I'm not sure what the exact words are, but that's one of the reasons why we had put that down. The other ones, the U.S. Mint has just got some neat things to see. It's a very visual thing for kids that have never seen money being made. It's pretty cool. Air and Space is always neat. Library of Congress, they're down the pike.
This is Leslie. I was at that Lemelson MIT meeting at the American History Museum. I think
you're gonna go to the right.
If you're speaking offline, if you wouldn't mind putting your phone on mute, that would be helpful.
I think the American History Museum one with the inventions is a little more geared towards adults. I was there for the Lemelson MIT. I'm not sure what you think. I personally think with the smaller kids, the Mint or the Spy Museum, just the visuals of the Mint just kind of blows them away. And the Space Museum, of course, too. But I don't know if someone else has been at the American History with the inventions, what they thought.
Other comments on this the ordering of any of these?
I just have a quick question. So if we have, this is Veronica again from Ohio. If we have 300 kids and they'll be there with their families, from a logistics perspective, and we're talking about, coming up with these ideas of what they can do, are you talking about, all kids, ideally heading over to the USPTO office at the same time, or are you thinking, almost you break them up into small groups and, there's not a tour guide, but kind of, like a character or somebody that's going to be taking them around to be able to kind of be their guide in groups of 30 or 50?
I think what we've talked about most is probably doing it in sections. So
okay.
Not going as 300 plus chaperones, but going as some subset of that, and maybe even that everybody sees all the things, but we see it in 3 groups or whatever that might be.
Sure. Okay.
For the things to do, this is Annalisa again. I wonder, just because of the age range, depending on what we decide the age range is, I wonder if we give we say K through, or whatever, 3 through 5 goes here and 6 through 8 goes here, or we give them a choice. So we're going to have 2 trips, and you just need to choose which museum you want to go see, just to give the kids a little bit of choice. And especially with the age, there might be some stuff that will be really interesting for some of the older kids and maybe not as much for some of the younger.
So I think
I disagree with Annalise. That's one of the questions. That's why this is Veronica again, why I was specifying if we broke into small groups, because if we do, it gives us a lot more freedom of what we could put together. If we break this into K through 3 primary, and then you have an intermediate section, and then you have a high school section, well, now not only can the kids all compete, but we could tailor, Friday's events. Maybe each grade has, 3 things that they can do. And a lot of them could cross over, but, giving them the option, I think, gives us a lot more flexibility as well.
Danny, you were going to say something?
I was just going to say what you just said. So, the idea here, I don't think we want to give students, we need to know where the kids are going because we need to be very organized. But I think what we do is we do make it age appropriate. So, for instance, the little kids would probably very much like going to the U.S. Mint, but the high school kids might really like going to the Naval Research Laboratory. So I think that's something that the subcommittee can consider and dole out appropriately. I also think that little kids can take longer to move from place to place and have a different attention span than the older kids.
Totally makes sense.
Definitely.
Cool. Any other comments on this for the moment? All right, good. We'll come back to this in follow-up, and certainly if you can, please participate in terms of helping coming up with specific recommendations on the various periods through the event. That'd be great. So this is probably a section that we're going to want to spend a decent amount of time, and we really like your considered thoughts on this. As we're kind of going into some new territory here in terms of planning this event, and your insights will be helpful. And I guess really what we're trying to uncover is to see what challenges or hurdles that you anticipate that you're going to have to overcome to participate and travel to Washington. And that could be the financial side, which we're working on a plan for that. But we certainly don't want to skip by that. And if there are some specific things financially we should talk about, great. But what other barriers as well do you see? And again, we're gonna stick on this for a while. So let's dig into it. But does anyone have some sort of initial thoughts on hurdles that it will take for your organization or for you to participate and travel to Washington?
And just to add some comments here, like some people have said they need to go through like 3 or 4 levels of approval. Some people have said that they need to submit budget organization or they need to get this approved in advance. We're just trying to understand what long-term issues we might need to be focusing on early on to help everybody with in order to make sure that they can actually go and ultimately send their kids to D.C.
Okay, I'll jump in. Can you hear me?
Good.
This is Veronica.
Yep.
Again, sorry. So our program, a few things. Our program is part of the Ohio Academy of Science, and it is free to students. And we usually have about 900 kids at our regional level. So we anticipate being able to send students because of the date that was chosen and best for everybody. Our last competition is on the date of the national competition. So we'll be able to send kids from our other regionals to it. But from a liability standpoint, our company wants us to make sure we have representation to help and be there with families. So that's one logistics thing for us that we will figure out internally. But the big concern from our standpoint is mainly having the younger kids there with a chaperone when it's still during the school year, especially at the end of the school year here in Ohio. We're worried about kind of the conflicts that we're going to have with the districts to be able to try to have kids come out and their families take off of work from a financial perspective. And at the end of the year, just the reality is we have a lot of snow days, and so a lot of kids have to have a certain amount of days of school. And so that's the concern, is that they might not be able to, just depending upon the winter that we have, they might not be able to come.
Gotcha.
At least that's what was brought to my attention by our organization. And we won't know that until much further in the year.
Right, of course.
And then the second one was for us financial. Because our program is free, we're in a lot of lower income areas, and how we afford to send, how we can afford to send a child and at least one chaperone is something that we got to work through.
Right. Is there an age cutoff? In other words, 4th grade or 5th grade and above that makes it easier within your program?
Not from that, what we were talking about. No, I mean, traveling becomes a little bit less of a liability as the older they get, but no, and honestly, we've talked about that internally, and we would rather see it offered to all the kids. Our program is K through 8. We'd rather see it offered to everybody at an even level versus, that's just our personal opinion, versus, only 3rd grade and up gets to go to nationals.
Right. Makes sense. Cool. Thanks, Veronica.
Mm-hmm.
Who else has thoughts on this?
This is Sheldon. I have a question. Is the National Committee going to have liability insurance to cover its members and the steering committee in particular in case there is a problem that arises?
Danny?
So that's a question, and I can address that. I've been having lots of conversations with an insurance company that's putting together a policy for us. And what the intent here is to make sure that everybody's covered by insurance. The question is going to be, do we get a policy at a national level covering everybody associated with this, or is it less expensive to give you the money for you to have an insurance policy to cover the people locally? I'm dealing with underwriters and going through all these machinations right now, but the intent is that we will address the insurance issue and have that fully covered. It's just going to be a question. See, some people on the phone call are with schools, some people are with nonprofit organizations, some people are with corporations. And so it's not, I can't have a blanket answer to what we're saying to that because everybody comes from a different scenario. So, Sheldon, the best I can do is to say, great question. We're on that, and we're going to come back with a solution. I just have no clue what the solution is yet.
Okay, because if we do need to get a policy for the organization, that's not, our experience has been, that's not something that happens overnight.
Understood.
So we would need
I'm having
some,
daily conversations on my end on this and trying to wrap this up as quickly as possible.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Sure. Any other, or what other thoughts with regard to hurdles specifically that you'll have in bringing your program to Washington?
Does anybody envision any approval issues within the organizations? Like, oh, I have to go talk so-and-so into this. They don't like to do this sort of thing? Or does everybody feel like when you go through to talk to the people you need to talk to that they're going to be very supportive of this?
Well, again, this is Sheldon. We find people are very supportive, but they don't really know very much about the specifics. And our program is primarily for elementary school kids. We're of the thought that if the child is not traveling with their own parent, then we'll need some sort of release to protect the person or persons supervising the children. So we'll need a legal opinion on that,
Right, and my goal is to get everybody that legal stuff as early as possible for that very reason.
Right.
Cool. Other thoughts on hurdles to get to D.C.?
Well, I think the biggest one is going to be the funding.
Right, and so the next meeting we're going to be dedicating a lot to talking through our proposal there and how we think we can go about that. I've already started having discussions with some of you about scheduling a trip out to sit down and go through some corporations in your area to raise those funds. And so if you haven't had that from me, you're on my list. It's just that we're just going sort of at a deliberate pace. So the goal is to try to hit up corporations between now and Thanksgiving. So just know that everybody on the phone call is on my list and have the presentations done and financial stuff that's required for those corporations to make those pitches, those materials done this week.
Cool. Well, please, if you have other hurdles and you just don't feel comfortable talking about them on the call here, please feed those back to either Danny or I and it's really important that we know what to anticipate. We found that we're both not very good at reading minds, so we don't want to rely on that skill.
It's only when it comes to my spouse, I'll get that.
This is
I'm
Abby
sorry,
in
somebody was
South
trying to say
Carolina.
something.
I'm sorry. This is Abby in South Carolina.
Hi, Abby, welcome.
Hi. I actually work for iHeartMedia, which is the largest radio company in the U.S. So from a financial standpoint, we are not allowed to take donations because we're not a nonprofit. So I was wondering how that would work for us.
Danny?
This is the part where I put my, I start tipping paper and put my hand over my mouth and go, I can't hear you, we're breaking up. Yeah, you know, I think we need to probably have a separate phone call. Can we talk tomorrow about that and then come up with a plan for that?
Absolutely.
I think the bottom line is that we can take in donations on your behalf and pay out those travel expenses and everything directly because we're a 501c3 or we have access to a 501c3. And so we'll work that through with you. In some ways, Annalisa in Chicago is in the same position, but she actually has a 501c3, actually, I forget, out of North Carolina that she uses. So I think you're the only one in that boat, so let's go ahead and take that offline. Do you have some time tomorrow or Thursday to talk that through?
Yeah, tomorrow would be great anytime in the afternoon. I'll shoot you an email after the meeting.
That sounds perfect.
Cool. Thanks. Do you see any other challenges in participating, Abby?
Not at the moment, no. Just the ones that have already been mentioned as far as the financial and getting prior approval.
Sure. Okay. Good. How challenging is your approval process?
It's actually not that bad because each market is allowed to do, they kind of have free reign over how they advertise and what they choose to do with their time and their money. So it doesn't have to go through like a corporate approval process. It just has to go through the market manager. And he's been apprised of all of this situation, and he is in agreement that it's a really great thing to do and that we should continue to do it.
Good. Good. Cool. Let's see. Any other comments with regard to local hurdles to get to DC? Okay. Again, if there is something you think about after we hang up, or you'd rather chat about this more discreetly, again, just please reach out to either Danny or I, and we will be glad to chat through it. But it's important we address any of those hurdles as early as we can. So our next topic is to chat through what we feel we want to recognize in Washington, and so we're certainly anticipating recognizing the top three in each grade. But what else should we recognize? And so there's some thoughts here on the screen, but are there some other thoughts that you all have in terms of skills or the certain ones of these that you particularly like, but skills or attributes that we would want to recognize?
This is Abby again.
Yes, please.
I have a question regarding that. Is everyone competing against each other, or are they broken out into like grades, I guess? Are all the fourth graders competing against other fourth graders, or are fourth graders competing against eighth graders and 12th graders?
Sure. More than likely, it'll be stratified by grade. I mean, that's really what we found to be best. But if people have thoughts on that, we'd love to listen as well.
So
I tend to cut the awards into two categories. There are the competition awards, like first, second, third, best invention, best most patentable invention, best pitch, best logbook, best poster, best prototype. So I think that's what when Bill says looking at a screen, what he's talking about. It's things like that. And I think we have the ability to do that by grade or across all of them. I think some of them are geared towards going by grade, and some of them are more geared towards going across everyone. Like the most marketable product, for instance, could be anybody. And if you're giving one award, I don't know that we necessarily want to give it per grade, because if you've got kindergartners, most marketable product, it just may not be worthwhile anyway, right? So I think that's something for us to consider. I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts about what you think would fall into grade specific and what would go across the entire.
So this is Veronica from Ohio again. This is an idea, and it's okay if it gets shut down, but so something that we have started to do in Ohio, because we were having trouble with our kids associating innovation with different industries, was when our kids register, we ask them to identify the industry that they innovated within. And oftentimes they can pick 2 or 3. For example, this is a safety transportation innovation. So when they make it to regionals, everybody gets recognized, at regionals. Okay, can we see all our agricultural innovators? Can we see all our household innovators? You get the idea. So we go through all these different categories, and every kid gets a chance to stand and be recognized at the award ceremony. And they all get a kind of a ribbon that they're an energy innovator, healthcare. Well, we do have donors that specifically are interested in, agricultural innovation or energy innovation. And so, we are able to sort through all the grade categories, all of the energy innovators, and the top innovator in that area, or inventor in that area, gets a specialty, like an industry, we call it an industry innovation award. And so we oftentimes recognize 3 or 4 different industries a year. At a national level, we might be able to say, hey, these are the ones that our country has said we really need to see some innovation in, energy or and just healthcare, and see if they come up with an invention in that area. And it could be anything in that scope, but sometimes your donors will directly underwrite the cost of whatever that award is.
This is Abby in South Carolina. We actually do something similar. Our invention convention is only 4th through 8th grade, but we generally have about 1,200 kids. And we do the top 3, so 1st, 2nd, and 3rd place for each grade. But then we also have, we call them superlative prizes that are backed by sponsors for that category, which could be anybody. It could be anybody 4th through 8th grade, so whoever has the most creative or the most health conscious or the most energy efficient prize. It doesn't matter what grade they're in, but they get a special prize for that from the sponsor that backs that prize.
Makes sense. That's great. Other thoughts?
Another thought from a prize perspective, I realize these kids are coming from all over the nation, but I think one of the biggest or most impactful things you can give is time in the form of like a mentorship of some sort. So if there was a way to give maybe like the top winner, the top 1 or 2 winners, some sort of, a person that's willing to walk them through kind of the next steps and really give them a mentorship in their time, I think that would be really valuable.
That's great. I facilitated a startup weekend this weekend, and one of the prizes was breakfast with a venture capitalist. But yeah, I think you can do a lot of fun things like that. Any other thoughts? Cool. Maybe what we'll do is we'll start mapping this out, and for the next call we'll have a draft that we all can react to and make comment to. I think it gets a little abstract when it's just sort of a brainstorm, and actually beginning to see how it's going to map out might help each of us react a little bit more to it as well. Does that make sense? I see the heads nodding, so that's helpful.
I think one question that I have for people is, we already acknowledged that we're only going to be able to take a portion of the students' to DC. And so the question is, this is sort of a digital question, because we've got two choices with those that don't go to DC. Let's just call it K through 4 for right now, for lack of a better cutoff. It's going to be 4, 5, or 6. Option A is that we judge it, all these will be judged online. Option A is that the kids are told who won in the broadcast that we would have on Saturday afternoon, the regular awards broadcast. We announce them alongside everybody else, and they just aren't going to be there to accept their award or anything online to, I think it'd be too much to try to coordinate. And so they would just find out that they won and be shipped the award. Option 2 is that we actually select the winners for those awards before the show, and we fly out the winners to DC. It would probably be pretty expensive, because I think you're talking about a more one-to-one type of relationship, one kid, one adult chaperone. But you might fly out, select the kids out there to DC in order to participate in the award ceremony and go through everything that everybody else is going through. That would impact some of the tours on Friday and everything else. But do people have an opinion one way or the other, option A, option B?
This is Tracy from Tennessee.
Yes.
Okay, I didn't know if you could hear me or not.
Yep.
I think with your two options, it depends on what the purpose is. If we're bringing the students there for the process and for the experience of it, or if we're bringing them there to give them an award. I thought that we were leaning more towards it being a whole process and the competition, and getting to know each other and mingling with others, et cetera. And then, so therefore, your option 2 would be it. Am I missing something?
I think maybe a secondary objective would be to create, really a couple things. One is to find a valuable way to recognize those that we weren't able to address into the in-person competition. The other is, there's part of the mission here is also to be sustainable, and there's no harm in having good press, and if good press, if we deem that it was valuable to have broader repreration from a standpoint of PR, that the cost benefit might be good when you start considering how do we sustain and create a year 2 and year 3, I suppose. And I'm not saying that's the answer, but it probably ought to go into the formula.
Okay, makes sense.
So yeah, no, clearly we want a good educational value. That's the core for sure.
Yeah, that's what I thought you were intending.
Yep. So, absolutely. Are there other thoughts on this?
Well, this is Sheldon. Here's a thought or a question. I'm assuming we're anticipating having about 300 student participants. And we're going to get the judging and an award ceremony done all in one day. Has anybody done a calculation of how long it's going to take to judge 300 different exhibits? Of course, we're going to have more than one judge, but even so, it does take some time to judge each individual exhibit. I'm just wondering whether we can get all of this done in one day if we don't do some pre-judging.
Sheldon?
Yep.
This is Veronica in Ohio. That actually just happens to be the exact number of our regional competitions, the 300, and we do all of them in one day with a competition or an award ceremony at the end. With about 75 judges, you can do the judging in half-hour increments with 10-minute cushion in between. So you're talking about 2.5 hours of judging, and then, you know, you have a little bit of tabulation time in between, and then an award ceremony. It's definitely an all day, but it is possible.
Okay, but the key number then you just gave me is we'll need 75 judges.
Yeah, I mean, the key is having, if you want the kids to each have a meaningful evaluation experience, you know, the less judges you have, the shorter time that they get. At 75 judges, each kid gets about 10 minutes, which I think is
an appropriate amount. Just to give another little data point, in Connecticut, we do our judging between 10 a.m. and 12 a.m., 12 p.m., so 2 hours worth of judging, and we go through about 1,000 kids with 450 judges.
Okay, so we not only have to have the kids come, but we also have a pretty significant number of judges that we have to accommodate. So
what you'll see, Sheldon, as part of our ask of the corporate donors is DC's got so many engineers and so many people there locally. We'll be making a huge ask of the corporations that are supporting us nationally to get their employees there on site to help us do the judging. It is a process. It's a full-time job for one person to make sure all the judges show up on
just to
May
coordinate. Yeah. That was my concern. Yeah. Okay.
It's a good concern. It's on the list, and it will be one person will be in charge of all the judges.
Okay. I have to run now, but keep me informed.
Thanks a lot, Sheldon.
Okay, we're almost at the end of the hour, and so it sounds like we have a couple of next steps, and I would think within the next 48 hours we'll have an email out with an overview of the 2 days, and certainly looking for people to opt into some sub-teams to take a look at content for those sections of the 2 days, and certainly we welcome you to be a part of that. We'll also, we've got a next meeting, and you all should have received a calendar invite this morning. We did move back to 4 just based on a couple of folks' schedules and comments. Does anybody who's currently on the call have a problem with moving from 2 to 4 every other Tuesday, at least for the time being? Okay, cool. So we're next Tuesday, October 20th at 4 on the East Coast, and I guess that'd be 1 on the West Coast. But I think that pretty much brings us full circle for this meeting. Is there anything else before we cut off that anyone wanted to chat about? Well, thank you all so much. We really appreciate your participation, and again, look for an email from us within about 48 hours, and we'll also have a recording of this call for anyone who'd like to refresh on it.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you, and have a great rest of the day.